Thank you for having us, and if Scott Pantel is out there, thank you very much for all the fabulous energy you apply to this conference, and of course his team. It's so wonderful to have. So what an amazing panel of people we have here. So we'll go around and they can, we'll let them do a brief introduction to themselves, and then tackle a question of maybe the biggest mistake they see in early stage med tech that's preventing companies from taking advantage of their situation. And why don't we start out with Gwen?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gwen Watanabe. I'm a managing director of H.I.G Capital. H.I.G Capital has $55 billion of assets under management, and I'm one of the managing partners for the healthcare fund. We focus on commercial growth, so after FDA approval, and then you've really figured out your sales model, and then growing from there. Right?
And your preventable mistake.
Oh,
that
goodness.
you see.
So I would say launching before you have really understood your commercial model. So meaning hiring, let's say 30 salespeople and then just sort of doing a shotgun approach versus, going deep into, let's say, pick a territory or Florida and hiring three folks there and then figuring out your sales model and then expand regionally. That would be my, what I see.
My name is Raymond Cohen. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Axonics, Inc. We're in the business of providing incontinence solutions primarily to women. The biggest mistake I would say that I see people make is they don't do design research before they start to develop their products. And I'm happy to talk more about what my definition of design research is.
Thanks, Ray. My name is Luke Duster. I'm a partner at CRG, which is a Boulder-based credit firm focused on commercial stage companies in the healthcare space across the spectrum. We generally invest between $20 to $200 million per company, so we're coming in later stage. The biggest mistake I see companies make, regardless of where they play, is raising too much money and then spending it quickly. If you raise a lot of money, spend it slowly, which means controlling your burn.
So I'm John Simpson. I am the CEO of Simpson Interventions, a very clever name that I worked really hard to do a complex search to see what we name our company. It's a small startup, and we're developing a coronary device. I'm trained as an interventional cardiologist, so that's kind of the fit. When Luke Duster sort of said raising too much money and spending it too fast, you saw his arm go over toward me. So, Luke, I want to publicly apologize for that. That was a mistake.
We all learn.
We all learn. But also, if I want to talk about a mistake, I think one of my mistakes was taking a company public too soon. A little bit along the lines of what everybody else is saying now.
Hi, everyone. Andrew ElBardissi. I'm a partner at Deerfield. We're a healthcare-only investment firm, manage about $16 billion. 2/3 of that is private capital, 1/3 is public. So we really have vehicles that are able to fund companies from inception throughout their life cycle. It's really tough. I get the last mistake. It's really elements of what everyone said, but maybe I'll go a little bit broader, which is really not understanding what in your business is going to create value. And so, to tie a few of the comments together, is it the product design? Is it quality revenue versus quantity of revenue? And not focusing on that in the most efficient way. You could see that in early stage companies all the way through late stage.
Good, and there's always something, everybody here is so accomplished. I'm going to fire a question at Ray first, who is one of the few, I don't know, many people, there might be somebody out there in med tech that's taken a company from its inception to a valuation of, is it at $3 billion today, or it's been at $3 billion. Talk to us a little bit about that story of how did it all come to be, and was it purposeful? Was it accidental? And weave it in with some things that you learned in creating this that might be helpful advice to others?
Well, you know, it's always a two-beer story, maybe a four-beer story, right? So I'll try to give you a short version of it. Axonics is, I think, a unique situation because it was started as a whiteboard exercise. Okay, so in other words, there wasn't like, you know, some engineer or physician like Dr. Simpson invented something and then, you know, you take it forward. So it was intentional in the sense of identifying a segment of the market, i.e. neuromodulation as a technology segment. The sense that this is the body electric is kind of the place to be these days. And I'm going back now even to 2013. And I think that's proven itself now that there's lots of therapies that are after many different clinical indications. So when I talked about design research, you know, first of all, it was a matter of saying, all right, well, what indication, what area do we want to go play in, right? And if you're going to do that, well, you got to do some real research, right? You know, you can't throw darts, you know, just throw darts, right? So we went through a process of bringing a lot of patients who had neuromodulation devices in their bodies, different applications. We brought physicians from all different types of stripes. In our case, it was electrophysiologists, it was interventional anesthesiologists, i.e. pain doctors, it was electrophysiologists who actually have more experience putting electronic devices in people's bodies than anything else. So, you know, it was gathering all this information about what are the problems to solve, what are the deficiencies in the existing products, and so on and so forth. And then it was a question of, okay, what market to go into by looking at how many competitors in the space, is there existing reimbursement, you know, what's the size of the market, you know, on and on and on. So that was kind of the genesis for us. And then we were fortunate, in a way, reading the tea leaves to say, okay, well, we're going to go after what we call overactive bladder or incontinence, because there was only one player who happened to have a monopoly in the space. That was Medtronic. And for those of you who've been in the business for a while, you know that Medtronic is really good at starting things, and then they're expert at giving up market share to new entrants. Okay? So, yeah. I agree. Right? So I thought, all right, and then, you know, I looked at their product and felt that we could do a lot better. So that, you know, I could go on, but that was the genesis of it. And then, of course, you need to raise capital, right? So, you know, you need a good story, you need a big market, and you have to have a good storyteller, right? Somebody with experience who's done it before, that people like Andrew over here have confidence in writing a check. So when we started with a $32 million Series A investment. And, you know, you need the capital to be able to hire the right people and to create infrastructure and to go down the path of creating something that works. Because the second biggest mistake that people make is they go to the clinic, to do a clinical study, with prototypes. And then you're explaining to your potential, who's going to be your first customers, well, you know, gee, don't worry about that. We're going to fix that. Oh, yeah, we're going to fix that. Oh, thanks for your feedback over here. I mean, it's embarrassing. So, you know, my other advice is get it together, validate your product, make sure that it's ready for prime time, and then go do some testing on humans. You know, there's a lot of other species that you can test stuff on before you go to people.
So it's amazing, a great story, great story. Let's move on to the capital markets and maybe how they are today. What's it like to raise money? How is it different from the past? So I'm going to look to John, the creator of ACS, Perclose, DVI, Fox Hollow. You raised money for all those companies. How is it different today when you're out there raising money?
It's impossible today. It's the only difference that I can see.
Where's the optimism, John?
Impossible.
Come on.
No, I don't know. I don't quite get it. You and I have already had this discussion a little bit, I suppose. But there was always an appetite historically, it seemed to me, from take the startup companies. Then you had the venture guys that would take it to kind of the next level, and then after that, then you had the strategics. And to be honest with you, I think venture's gone. Were less powerful than it might have been at one time. So now then you have the startups, and then ventures kind of gone. And startups going to strategics is a kind of a disaster. The strategics in general, not to offend everybody here, but maybe some.
Just stick on the Medtronic. You can offend them as much as
let me talk about that. No, so there's this big gap, it seems to me now, in terms of raising money. And, you know, I think our new device is the coolest thing you could ever imagine, of course, which is what I've thought about all my devices, which unfortunately was not always the case. Luke will confirm that. But the way that you encourage this current environment to look more carefully at something that's kind of breakthrough, because I'm not too interested in a device that is sort of a little bit better than something else. I'm not a particularly incremental kind of a guy. But the breakthrough technologies, if you use that term, are not very popular with the current investor base that I've been exposed to. Now, hopefully, we're exposed to a whole new one right now, so we'll learn more about that. But it's just so different now that it's hard for me to characterize it as anything more than some kind of a disconnect between startups, not having the venture community anymore to rely on, and then I've made a fair amount of money for venture guys in the past. They have short memories, unfortunately. So,
Which can be good and could be bad.
well, I don't know. Is it good or bad?
I think you have a great track record.
Oh, there you go. We've got the track record here. So, anyway, I think it's complex, and more complex than I might have thought it would be at this point.
Okay. Well, let's get everybody to comment on this, which I think is what a lot of people raising money are thinking. Where is the capital today? So we always get, it used to be, I know Ray did really well in Europe, because Europe used to be a spot to go to. Is it the U.S. venture? Is it China? Is it a SPAC? Is it a private equity? Where do you go to get early capital? We've got some late capital here, but if somebody wants early capital, where should they go? What would be your advice and strategy if you were a CEO?
So one of our companies is early, so meaning, you know, before really having a foothold in the revenue cycle. And they did go to China, and they raised money giving away distribution rights. And again, I wouldn't, you know, in this market, it's something to think about. You know, if that's an exchange, you know, I'm doing a Series A and I need to start my company, you know, that is one way to do it. There's obviously, you know, speaking from the strategic side, the role that I used to have, you know, that could affect your outcome negatively later on, but at least you would have survived, right, to then go on and create a company. So that's one way to do it. There's also build to buys, so meaning companies, smaller companies are going to the strategics and saying, you know, I would like to build this for you. It's off your P&L, your income statement, therefore, but we agree on an exit, which usually isn't as high as, you know, something that Ray's company did, but that's another sort of structure that you could look at.
Part of the problem is there's less strategics than there used to be based on consolidation, so there's just less buyers in the market. And some of them are making some bets, some small bets, but I haven't seen them do it exclusively.
Right.
I've only seen a strategic come in on an early stage deal when there's a venture, a syndicate,
Right.
and then the strategic might throw some additional money in there. Personally, I think that if you have to do that, fine. But you're limiting yourself. If you've got a board member from one of the large companies sitting on your board, I mean, when it comes time to have an auction or exit, you kind of mess things up. I don't mean to. I love you, I love you dearly, but I don't mean to disagree with you. If you want to do a deal in China and give away distribution rights, you might as well just give them all your plans and all the designs to your product, because they're just going to copy it.
Right.
I mean, trust me, that's the reality, right? And all you need to do is talk to people that's happened. So let me answer the question, if I could.
Yeah, and explain the downside of having a strategic on the board.
Well, I mean, you know, they know everything, right? And then, you know, you want to try to if you got interest or you want to try to sell the company, well, now you got the enemy kind of in your camp, right? In a way, right? So anyway, that's maybe a conversation for a different panel. But
It depends on the rights that they have.
well, they better have no rights.
Right, no rights, but they do have information.
They have a lot of
And they won't do that either.
Say again, please?
They won't do a no rights deal.
Well, that's the other thing. Everything's got strings attached to it,
Right.
right? So why you're just trying to get your company off the ground, and now you've given away the future of your company. So I don't think that's a great idea. I think, look, it's a tough environment. I agree with Dr. Simpson. This is a difficult environment. We've been here before. Some of us who've been around for a while, we've seen the cycles. You know, right now you can't do an IPO, right? Okay, so that market is dead. And venture is a little bit freaked out right now, so they get their hands in their pocket more often than not. But I think you got to start from the beginning. Okay, if you haven't done this before, you better find somebody who you're willing to partner with, who will give you some time and attention, and get that person on your board, get them to help you, because as Andrew will tell you, he likes to bet on things, but he likes to bet on people even more. So, you know, I'd say, first of all, find somebody who's been successful, who's raised a lot of capital, who's had some exits, who's known in the venture community, and get involved with that person, you know, to help you, right? I think that's one. And then also, don't go to the most obvious places sometimes. You know, you mentioned, I mean, when we raised our Series A, I raised money from China. So I had the largest venture capital investor in China. Now there's no money coming out of China, by the way, so that was a good idea back in the day. I went to Europe, I raised money from Europe, and then I raised money from the US as well. So it was a true, you know, kind of syndicate. There's a lot of money sitting out there for medical devices. This is a medical device conference, right? There's money out there in venture firms in Europe right now. And, you know, there's less entrepreneurs there. They don't have access to the same, you know, talent pool as we have in the United States. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you got to be a little creative sometimes to be able to get the capital you need.
Ray, let me ruin everyone's party. Sure. We just finished 5 years of record-breaking venture capital fundraising. We're sitting on a huge keg of dry powder that still exists for healthcare companies in both the private markets and the public markets. That is going to stop. The advice I give my portfolio companies right now is raise your money this year. It's going to get worse next year.
Why?
The fundraising cycle. Fundraising cycles take years. We just finished a huge bull market where the fundraising market peaked during the last 36 months. It's now going to be coming off that peak for the next several years as LPs. Raising funds, which is you got to think macro, right? And so today there's still a lot of dry powder out there. Is it becoming more selective? Is it searching for higher quality opportunities? Absolutely, but it's still there. We're still seeing companies that have exceptional opportunities like what you designed for Axonics, raising capital in today's market. I think it actually gets tougher next year at this conference.
I think the real dichotomy here is that we're trying to generalize to all medical technology companies, and that's very difficult to do. So to try to identify the root cause of why fundraising is difficult, maybe to oversimplify, you sort of have healthcare technologies that are incremental improvements with nominal capital to get to some value inflection point. There is a profile of investor that would invest in that. Unfortunately, that is not Deerfield, okay? And then there are the big bets where you're putting a lot of capital to work to hopefully develop a category-defining therapy of some sort. Those are huge sums of capital required in order to get to that value inflection point. When you look at where we are today, we're all managing our portfolios. We all see the fact that existing investors are not investing in new companies for the most part. To some degree, there may be selective opportunities where they decide to move forward with an investment. And the number one priority is how do you maintain the viability of your portfolio? And for investors who, and maybe this gets to the dry powder point, for investors that are focused on those big bets, if I thought it was going to be a $60 million investment when I underwrote it, it might need to be 120. So that dry powder isn't that dry. It gets consumed pretty quickly. And unfortunately, we're in a cycle where we're all just staring at each other and no one's investing. And until someone breaks that cycle and starts investing in new opportunities, and by someone I mean like a lot of people, right? You need critical mass. then you step off that mindset of, okay, I don't need to play defense anymore. I can start playing offense. I don't know when that inertia is broken, but I don't think we're anywhere close to being broken.
Well, let's transition into where it seems like a lot more capital is coming from, but it seems like it's happening with a lot more frequency. The friends and family, the oil money, the places that are not from your sophisticated med tech investor. So these investors get involved. What's some advice you can think of when you come along later stages and you look at the cap table that's early and you look at the rights given to the early investors? What do you look at that's preventable mistakes or things that keep you from investing because of what that early syndicate looked like that people can react to today and make sure they do it right?
So a lot of times when that happens, the valuation creeps up to a level where when, let's say I was going to go in, I would have to give them a down round. And sometimes when that happens, a lot of folks who were early investors don't, they're not very happy with that. Really? Yeah, right. So having said that, I've been a part of 4 successful startup companies. We would set, normal valuations that weren't, off the charts, sky high, Series A. We would take angel money, LSI, Band of Angels. Actually, Wilson Sonsini invested in our companies, and a lot of individuals, wealthy individuals. But at least for the B, so setting it up for the Series B, we weren't, in a skyrocketing valuation where somebody who was going to come in, a venture fund, and then have to give it a 50% haircut. I think that is a mistake because, we don't want to, make our partners, I view all those shareholders as partners, upset from day one. So
what's the lesson? Be careful about how you set the valuation with the early stage investors.
Yeah, yes.
Set expectations properly.
Set expectations properly and make sure that, a lot of times you think a high valuation in a Series A is a good thing, but a lot of times it's actually prohibitive. Yeah. Like I'll look at it and be like, oh, forget it. I'm not even going to have that conversation because I know what they're going to say, and and I don't want to put in, my time into something where people are thinking, oh, well, I want a $100 million pre-money valuation for something that has 0 sales. Then we'll just say, not in our sort of wheelhouse and pass.
Andrew, what have you seen, and what kinds of advice do you have for, first of all, I'm sure you've come across a lot of interesting scenarios. By the way, how many boards have you served on?
I don't count. I think I have 15 or so now, and I'm sure I'm leaving some out.
Okay, so you've probably been on over 100 boards. You've looked at a lot of deals. What are they doing? What can the entrepreneur do to make sure they get their terms right in the beginning so that when you come along, you're not dealing with a headache?
Yeah, so valuation's a very easy thing. I don't think people understand the implications of structure as well. So typically you don't see this in Series A deals, but a lot of people think, oh, if I just have a 2x liquidation preference, then I'll get 2x my money out. What you don't realize is you've just set off a ticking time bomb where maybe the next round gets put on a 2x and the next round gets put on a 2x, and before you know it, you're recapitalizing the whole company because that's unsustainable. The other thing that I think is really important is voting control, or really just voting in general. So when you bring on a number of smaller shareholders rather than larger institutional investors, you can have a very fragmented cap table where it's difficult for governance to function effectively, right? Because now you have to go out to 150 people to get their votes on what should be pretty routine items versus 2 or 3, large institutional investors who can make the decision, at the board level effectively as a proxy for shareholders. The final thing I've seen, which is very odd and is always a non-starter, is, and I'm going to apologize to founders here, but when founders have blocking rights on certain things, because that makes it very challenging for investors to, potentially at times make very difficult decisions that are maybe not fully aligned with the founder's interests. And so those are, hopefully that gives you a sense of things that we look out for.
Too many people have been, they pay attention to the what the hell's his name? The Facebook guy. What's his name?
Oh, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes, yeah. They look at him and they look at Elon Musk and they think like that's the way it should be, right? Look, dilution, part of what you're talking about is founders want to control the vast majority of the equity. And, my view is 100% of nothing is nothing, okay? I mean, okay. You can't finance your company unless you're going to give up equity, right? And if you're reasonably smart, it's a 1x liquidation preference. That's it. That's the deal. It is 2x, 3x. That's just going to kill you on the exit. You're going to work your ass off and you'll make nothing on the way out, right? So you got to keep vanilla terms, and that's really good advice that you're providing. But I think this concept of dilution, I don't know, like it must be like page 38 in some MBA handbook that somebody got. Like, dilution is not the problem, right? It's okay to be diluted. Look, if you can create real value, and that's what we're talking about in this session, you create real value. If you own 1, 2, 3, 4% of something that has real value, that's generational wealth for you. That's generational wealth, right? So, don't get hung up on the percentages. It doesn't matter. It's part of the game, right? So I think that's good advice. And the other piece is don't with this notion of you want to increase the round price, right? That's unfortunately like bad advice from venture capital investors, right? Because they want to write up the paper investment on their books, right? That's nonsense. Don't put valuation at the amount of capital you raised. You raise the capital, that's your valuation. You raise more capital, that's your valuation. Believe me, it'll be your friend if you're successful with the venture and you're actually going to go public later. As opposed to doing a reverse stock split to go public, you can go public, 1-to-1, or maybe even get the benefit of a forward stock split. So there's some smart things that you can do early on, and this comes back to advice. Like, who are you getting your advice from, right? Who are your advisors, Because it's a learned experience. I think this is the point. We're sitting here, we've been around for a while, right? It's a learned experience. It's not something that, you're going to get your MBA and you're going to walk out and you're going to be like, I'm ready to go. No. They forgot to tell you about all this stuff that really is important, So
I want to touch on one thing, sorry to monopolize the conversation, but I think this is just a really important point that I've now seen a number of times. Board members and CEOs are board members. We are all there to maximize shareholder value. We are not there to support a CEO's mission of being the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Elon Musk. Potentially that is something that is in the cards. But potentially it isn't. Potentially the best outcome for all shareholders is not to build a standalone company that is a multi-billion-dollar market cap company. Perhaps a technology is best served in the hands of a strategic partner, and perhaps you maximize shareholder value by avoiding unnecessary dilution down the road by transacting at an earlier point. And I feel like there have been, I think in this environment, maybe not this environment, the 2019, 2020 environment, has breeded this desire or notion where companies can go public with zero revenue and they can, capital is effectively free. And so now everyone wants to build their own company. I mean, we need to sort of recalibrate as to what our jobs are on these boards. We're there to maximize shareholder value.
The best time to sell a company is before you ship the first commercial product.
No argument here.
Right? I mean, that's like, huh? What are you talking about? That's the best time. All right? You may not get the biggest exit, but if you get an exit, that is a big score. That's a big notch on your belt. And then your next deal, you're going to be able to get access to capital and so on and so forth. So don't be greedy. If you can get out of a deal and make some money on it if you make money for your partners, it's like the line from The Godfather. You're going to do well.
So Ray, elaborate on that once about. I've often heard this inflection point. Your maximum value is here. You go to market. and it actually drops off. Now, why is that? Now you're commercial, you're selling stuff. Shouldn't it go up? Why
Damn
not?
hard to sell stuff. It's really
Never goes
hard.
as planned. Is that what you're saying?
It's really hard, right? You know, adoption of new technologies. Dr. Simpson will tell you all about that. You got some time. You can spend a week telling you how hard it is, right? It's hard, you know, to do all the things you need to do to be able to be a commercial company. But if you got a cool technology that fits a need and so on and so forth, if you can get somebody else to buy it, and it doesn't need to be a Medtronic, a Boston Scientific, an Abbott, or a Teleflex, right? It could be a mini strategic. Yeah. You know, I mean, hell, Axonics bought a company. We paid $200 million in cash and made all the people involved in that project millionaires, right? Yeah. Okay, that was a great deal.
So I'll fight back. So the original title of this presentation was "How to Create a $1 Billion Company," right?
That's how we started, and we got Ray.
He made that shit.
No, that's right. Have you ever seen a pre-commercial med tech company in the last 5 years sell for $1 billion? No.
Not pre-commercial.
Yeah, but if you can,
Connor
So we
Med
want to make $1
Systems.
billion here. That's the goal. We want to be like you, right? We want to see how you did it.
listen,
Yeah.
you know, if I had gotten the right offer before we commercialized and before we went public, I'd have sold it. Just didn't get the right offer. So
Fair.
I'm not talking out
Fair.
of both sides of my mouth.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I might be on the wrong panel. I thought this was maximizing shareholder value, so my apologies.
The original draft was how to get to $1 billion thing, and then it was shareholder value. I would say, though, that for shareholders, a key point here is I've seen a lot of bad cap tables. You have. We all have. Those are fixable. If you have a bad business, that's not. Right? If you haven't done what Ray did to design yourself ahead of time and see what the vision is for yourself commercially, where are you going to fit in reimbursement-wise, where are you going to fit in competitively, what's your gross margin going to be, how's the sales force going to look? If you haven't done that work in designing kind of where you are today as an audience today, early stage med tech, that's where the problems are going to be. Your cap table, yes, that's a secondary problem, but it's not the primary.
So, okay, thank you. So the reason why after you get approval, your value goes down is because now you're being measured by revenue and EBITDA multiples versus before that, you know, it's a model on a spreadsheet. It's a story, right? So you can tell your story. I'm sitting on the other side as a strategic going, well, you know, this, and that. But then if you wait, now you have to prove it and then prove it again. And then quarter after quarter. And now I have my multiples, and I'm doing TTM multiples, NTM multiples, EBITDA, this and that, right? Comps. So that's the reason.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I want to save a couple of minutes at the end for any questions the audience may have. So if you've got that burning question you think that everybody would appreciate, please start thinking about that. I'm going to go back to Dr. Simpson, and who's been part of several successful go-to-markets of therapies that tend to work. And I think we're an industry has probably too many amazing technologies that were never adopted. You had 4 huge hits that all showed adoption. What's your thoughts around how people figure out that go-to-market so that it does become successful?
Well, I would say that the focus, everybody says this, it has to be on the patient. So you have to identify a patient need that is really, really extraordinary. And, you know, and it's usually an unmet need. And for me, historically, it was usually where I had some problem in my medical practice. And my great example, I'll tell a brief story about Tom Fogarty, because Gwen knows Tom really well. But in the era when I was at Stanford, we just started putting in stents, and the patient ran coagulated. So I was the fellow at the time, and I had to hold the groin after they pulled the sheaths in an anticoagulated patient, and they would just bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed. And so finally one day Tom Fogarty came in, and I said, Tom, you got to take this patient to the OR. We got to close this. I can't do it. I can't hold enough pressure to get the bleeding to stop. So he said, okay, I go up with him. So anyway, Tom is there. So he makes an incision in the cut down on the artery, and he takes one stitch, and he goes, bzzz, it's done. Closes it off, seals off the artery, and I'm there, I said, Tom, I can do that percutaneously. And he said, horse shit. You cannot do that percutaneously. So we couldn't do it so quickly, so it's several years that it took Perclose to develop a technology so that it could be done percutaneously. But it was such a unique application of an unmet clinical need that was pretty striking at the time because it was related to hemorrhage from the groin, retroperitoneal bleeds, deaths associated with this. It had to be something that was really kind of special. And I think of, I remember the early days of balloon angioplasty and the over-the-wire system. I am not talented enough to use the Grunsig. Nobody here would know Grunsig's system, but it was a fixed wire system. I could never make it work. So it wasn't like I had some great vision. I was desperate. I need a system that has a movable guide wire. If I'm going to put a balloon in somebody's coronary artery, of course, that's the area, we told people we're going to make balloons, we're going to put them in people's coronary arteries, we're going to blow them up, and the patients are going to get better. Okay, great, but not all the investors bought into that. So you think it's a tough sell today? Try selling balloons in coronary arteries that have never been done before. I mean, it's like, it might as well be selling snake oil. They said, really, this is going to be. What I'm trying to say, maybe I should say it more concisely, a really, really, really genuine patient need and a really, really unique contribution to solving the need that that patient has. If that's the driver, you have a magical opportunity to build a business around it. Doesn't always happen, but more often than not, that will happen. And that would be my, sort of my current feelings on what it takes to get something from zero. So we had, I don't know, what, 5 companies that had 0 sales in one day until, maybe, I don't know, our biggest sales day for Foxhall was probably $2 million in one day. So that was a good sales day, by the way.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Okay, we've got 1 minute left. We got time for one question from the audience. We'll go with, okay, so the question is, what's a reasonable expectation for market penetration of a new medical device?
Well, it just depends what the total addressable market is. I mean, I'm in a category right now where our penetration is probably 1% to 2% of the total addressable market. Well, if you can generate hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, then okay, it works. But if you got only $100 million TAM, right, nobody's going to invest in that because it's not realistic that you're going to go out and capture so much. And I think another thing, just to follow on what Dr. Simpson said, you also need to take into, it's not just about have you come up with something that solves a clinical problem, but you have to think about what are the economics involved. And can people make money doing this? We work in an environment where, institutions need to make money. The physician needs to make money. So, that's part of it too. You have to think about that. And then also you got to think about, are people going to be up for using this thing, right? And like if you go into the hospital, well, it's everywhere now. Nobody wants to do any work. I don't want to do any work. It's like, oh, I got to do this other thing now? Well, it's really good for patients. Well, I'm not getting paid enough, and my boss treats me like shit, and my health insurance sucks, right? That's what's going on in the healthcare provider business today.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I would love to keep going.
So, Ray, that was a little grim, but I'm going to go with you on that. I think that's probably the truth.
So, thank you, everyone, for being here, and thanks for being part of LSI.